Button.
Okay. We ready to get started, y'all. Happy Tuesday, September the 27th. Can y'all believe that? This is the last one that there will ever be a 9/27/22. There'll be a 9/27/23, so on and so forth. But this is the last September. I want y'all to think about that. This is the last Tuesday, September the 27th of 2022 that will ever exist. So I want you all to, again, get your mind right, get excited, be thankful. Think about what you're most grateful for on this beautiful day, this beautiful fall day. I'm not a fall guy, but that was a double entendre. I'm neither. I'm a summer person, but I respect the beauty of fall and what it signifies and the changing and the coming of a new season and those winds of change. So I'm really excited. And again, we just offer you all words of welcome during this amazing training, which we're uber excited about. We're joined by one of our amazing frequent collaborators, soon to be Dr. Brian Sells, who's going to be spending some time with us today talking about in a discussion, because this is not going to be a one-way thing, and Brian will speak on that. But today's conversation is all about the art and science of matching and initiating, right? And this is coming on the heels of our previous conversation around screening and start effective practice, the EEP, one of the 6 best practices for mentoring. So with that, we're going to keep on rolling before we pass it to Brian. But my name is Sadiq Ali. I am the executive director with Mentor Maryland, DC. Proud and as excited as ever as I near my 5th year in role. I'm joined by some of the amazing Mentor Maryland DC team. Andrew Lolavar, give a wave. Your little square, give a wave. Dayon McLaren Johnson is with us as well. Start of the Starbucks Dunkin' war in the chat box. Good job, Dayon. We're also joined by one of our newest members to the Mentor Maryland DC, one of our new AmeriCorps Vista members, Michael Molly McCaskill.
Yes.
I know Michael Molly is around.
Michael Molly.
Give a wave, Michael Molly.
Yes.
Michael Molly down there. And one of our extended family, one of our core contributors as well, Ms. Jeanette Simon, who many of you all have worked with as well. Jeanette is one of our illustrious, esteemed technical assistance consultants that works directly with programs to help implement best practices. So with that, if this is your first, drop a 1 in the chat box if this is your first Mentor Maryland DC training event. Drop a 1 in the chat box. There's always one, Dayon. Look at that.
Welcome, Laura. Welcome.
Oh, we got a couple. Hey, let's give them a round of applause, you all. Oh,
Joshua,
we're so excited that you all are with us.
Emanuela, yes. Thank you for joining us.
So this slide is for all the ones, you all. If this is your first time joining us, we are Mentor Maryland DC. We are one of 25 or so statewide or regional affiliates attached to Mentor National, aka the National Mentoring Partnership. And our role is as convener. It's as supporter, uplifter of best practices. We drive the march towards quality mentoring. We believe that quality mentoring comes before quantity, right? Just having a bunch of young people you're working on or working with, rather. And that's why we exist, to ensure that best practices are readily accessible, that resources that you all need to do your work really, really at a high level, again, that you all are aware and have access to these resources. And again, that last underline in that paragraph, we provide training, research, public awareness, technical assistance, and again, trainings just like today, 98% of which are no cost. So we appreciate you all being with us today, and we're excited to be able to turn the microphone over to, again, another one of our just titans in the mentoring field. Brian's going to give you all about his background, but we're so excited to always have Brian in our midst because of the tremendous wealth and spirit and passion that he brings to this work. So with that, Brian, you with us? Passing it to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, and good morning to everyone. Thank you, Sadiq. It's always a pleasure to hear your voice and to hear from everyone at Maryland Mentor and the great leadership that you have shown in the last 5 years to see the organization grow back to its previous glory. Definitely warms my heart in many different ways. And of course, it is a pleasure to be here with all of you to talk to you about an issue of some importance as it relates to the youth mentoring field. As Sadiq mentioned earlier, I've been working in the field of mentoring for the last 20 years, but I've been working with young people in youth development in a variety of different spaces for over 30 years. That's the gray hair, right? Trained hundreds of volunteers and staff, a variety of different issues related to mentoring, youth mentoring, and used to work for the National Mentoring Partnership, i.e. Mentor. So it's going to be great to get a chance to talk with all of you. Next slide, please. I don't want to make this just me sort of presenting at you. I definitely want to engage folks and give people an opportunity to share and to talk, since we have a good amount of time to kind of walk through some things. So if you can, if you're comfortable, go right ahead and type your name, your organizational affiliation, your position at your program, and where you're located. And then one thing you're looking to learn. And if I see any familiar faces, I will call on them. Also great to be here with my good friend who helped me get started in the mentoring field, almost 20 years ago, Jeanette Simon, who has a PhD in life and a PhD in program practices. Many years ago, Jeanette and I, when I was still working in the field, just getting started in Washington, D.C., spent a lot of time working with her, doing training and technical assistance. She attending events with me, helping me put together events. And Jeanette is the author and the owner of the Mentor Monday many years ago, Fox 5 TV, sort of like a Fox Mentorathon to recruit volunteers. So it's always a pleasure to be in her midst and to be around her. So she knows I'll call on her because she will straighten me out in many different ways. So appreciate all of you in many different respects. So it looks like we've got folks here from Big Brothers Big Sisters of Salisbury, Tomorrow Youth Center Mentoring Coordinator. Is that Alicia Fries? Am I pronouncing your name correctly, Alicia? Unmute yourself. Where are you out of?
Yes, you got it. My name's Elisa. I'm from Leaders of Tomorrow Youth Center, and we're located in Baltimore.
Okay, I think I remember you from before. Okay, so CASA with Shakina. That's great. Great organization. Got Michael there. Is that Davon Green? Davon, what program are you from and where you at? Where you out of? I call on folks. I don't do it to embarrass you. You know,
that's totally fine. My screen is actually cracked, so I can't type. So
it's all
I'm
good.
I'm Devon Green. I'm from Discover Yourself. I'm the founder. I was a youth mentor program out of Baltimore. So it's like a big brother, big sister, little sister type of thing. But it's aggressive. It's aggressive. So basically, I looked at my life and where I went left at, and I'm trying to counter it. Well, I'm countering it with this next generation. So we teach financial literacy. That's a big thing. We travel. It's just it's real. We teach agriculture, because that's another big thing I believe in. Is a reason for what's going on today. I grew up, I don't mean to take over but yeah, I grew up, I'm in the 80s. I'm 34, so 88 to be exact. And we had grandma house, Big Mama house. It's a thing. And nowadays, a guy I went to high school with, just his son that he had in high school just had a baby. So grandparents now are 30, 32, 33. They don't own a house. They don't have a garden. Grandparents barely know how to cook oodles and noodles. So we teach agriculture, financial literacy, all the stuff they didn't give us in school.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, good brother. Appreciate you sharing. So it's always wonderful to hear the different models of mentoring, to learn from practitioners in the field as well. Thank you, sir.
That's
All right. So it looks like we've got some folks. So one of the questions that I wanted to ask folks is, what is something that you're looking to learn or learn more about? I see, let's see, I can call on Hannah or Lauren or both of you all. Just looking at the Hollywood squares here. Go right ahead.
Yeah,
Lauren?
no, that's fine.
Hannah, go ahead.
I came into this job not knowing a ton about the logistics of matching. So I've been doing it, and I'd like to think it's been going well, but I never was really taught about the best tips or the best practices of actually doing it. Does that make sense?
Interesting. That makes perfect sense. Been there, done that. Yes, ma'am. Lauren, go right ahead.
Yep, I'm just looking to hear from the group and also hear from you, Brian, on just ways to be a better matcher. I think I'm pretty good at it. I have a background in corporate recruiting, so I kind of understand some of that. But obviously at a school like Towson, which is really diverse, I'm just looking to be able to get those students matched with individuals that are going to give them the best care and support.
Beautiful. I appreciate that. So thus the title, the art and science of matching and initiating. I don't know who I borrowed that phrase from. Everybody says it. Could have been Dr. Susan Weinberger, Dr. Mentor back in the day, but certainly in my experience working in mentoring programs, I found that the science is one thing, i.e. the research, which we'll talk a little bit about. And then the art is really just trying to match the personalities. And in fact, in some ways, it's almost like one of these dating services, for lack of a better word. It's like you have, I forgot the name of all of them because I'm not doing all those sites and everything. So Dion's laughing at me, but really when it gets down to it, it's like how you bring these two people together that don't really know each other, right? So we can go to the next slide. So why are we here? The objectives for today, we want to discuss and talk about matching and initiated standards with participants, right? All of you should be, given the fact that you all have received training from Maryland Mentor, from the elements of effective practice, right? So we want to talk about what those standards are, and I'll spend a little bit of time just walking through that. If people have questions, feel free to type in the chat or even ask a question. Then next, we want to talk about how effective matching builds the foundation, right? It builds the connective tissues like ligaments and tendons that are connecting individuals, both mentors and mentees, for a quality mentoring relationship. Then we want to discuss what the process looks like, right? And I think that's what it really, in my experience working with programs and actually running programs, is what's that process look like? How intentional are we in the process of making the match? What's the criteria that we use? And then the next part is the initiating part. What's that first mentor, mentee, or protege meeting look like? So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And then utilize informed criteria to build a program-specific matching strategy and process. So when I first started this mentoring work, I didn't know a lot. And sort of felt with Hannah, you might have been able to access some information at the time when I was starting in the field. I think only the second edition of the Elements of Effective Practice were out. Mentor at the time was a heck of a lot smaller, couldn't always access information. While mentoring was known, the affiliate network wasn't as big or as strong. I mean, you all are very blessed and able to benefit from all of the new information and knowledge, and most importantly, the materials that have been created in the last 20 years. And then lastly, what I want to do is put us all in breakout sessions and do a matching activity exercise. All right. Next slide, please. So we think about, again, the art and science of matching. This is just sort of my take on this, is when we think about the science piece, that's the research-based information that we have gotten, right? We know we match by shared interests and hobbies and personality. To the extent that that can be done, we use those elements of effective practice, both the benchmarks and the enhancements. And then today, over the last couple of years, we've also have some research on one-to-one matching, which is what a lot of programs, but also today we have group matching standards that are built on the community-based mentoring standards from the elements of effective practice. And then we think about the art, right? How do I get somebody, if I wanted to match Sadiq and Andrew together, right? Just using an example, what does that look like? What do they have in common? And then how can I take this information, this data, right? How can I take that information, the data about their interests, about their hobbies, about their personality, about their background, and then bring them together? So all programs operate out of some sort of institutional gut, right? Their own feelings about their ability to connect individuals. But as I'll share with you my experiences, and you'll also learn from each other, you'll realize that a lot of it is your own programmatic instinct, even using the best practices. So in many respects, that program experience, that intentionality oftentimes gets down to your gut instinct. Next slide. So what is matching? So some research by Julia Price and Tom Kelly back in 2011 says that matching is essentially the successful matching of an older person with a younger person. Specifically in a mentoring program, it's really, really important to understand and to explore what that looks like. It aims to do what? To identify, right, what we talked about earlier, those characteristics, secure, and then ultimately support the connection, the pairing of the young people with the adult, right? Or in some ages, the older youth. Next slide. I want you to think about for a few minutes here. And again, we're gonna make this interactive and keep it interactive. What's the most difficult aspect of matching mentors and mentees? Now, if you haven't done this yet with your program, it could be something that you're thinking about. So I want you to take maybe a minute or two and think about what has been the most difficult aspect of matching mentors with mentees in your program. And I'll come back to you in a minute. All right. Any volunteers, or do people want to be voluntold? So I can do it either way. Okay, let's take a look at Dakari Taylor Watson, lead coordinator, Communities and Schools, the nation's capital. Any thoughts, any ideas?
Good morning, you all. And I apologize, my camera's off. I'm in transition.
No problem, Dakari. Go
But
right ahead.
I'm actually new to the matching aspect of it. I've worked in different realms where there was more group settings, and so we didn't necessarily have to match students with mentors. However, I am working with a site now that we are looking to actually match individual mentors with individual students. And these are kindergarten through 5th grade students. And so I think for me, it's just learning, I guess, like lay the land, so to speak, what's happened in the past, and then what the expectation is of what this looks like. So then taking that information and applying it to now we can match mentors effectively with mentees.
Okay. Oh, I appreciate that. I'm gonna come back to you because I want to talk about that group matching process and what that looks like. We found some new research from Dr. Gabriel Coopermick, who does research around group mentoring. He's out of Georgia State. So we'll come back, talk a little bit about that. Anybody else have any thoughts, any specific thoughts about what's been difficult for them?
I'll give you one.
All right, Sana, go right ahead.
Okay. For me, for the years that I've been in it, the biggest problem has been the parents. In actually agreeing to and actually supporting the relationship in a positive way.
Okay. So parents as a challenge has been a challenge with the difficult aspect of matching, okay? So you're saying that post-match, once the match is made, the parents having an issue?
Yes, technically, yes.
Okay.
Yes, and I think it's because they're probably not involved enough in the matching that when it happens, they're just not always comfortable with it.
And I want to speak to that in a moment there. I see Dayon, you have your hand raised, I believe?
Yeah, Brian, I've got a couple comments in the chat.
Go right ahead, please.
Shekinah Davis, she's with CASA. She said her focus is on matching court-appointed special advocates. We know CASA in foster care. So she's looking at this training from that angle. And so the hardest part is not having enough BIPOC, LGBTQ volunteers.
Okay.
And then Joshua Bailey also agreed, having trouble recruiting enough mentors who speak Spanish.
Okay. All right. So some of those things are on the recruiting and screening level. Not the total focus of our problem or of our conversation today, but those are problems or challenges for the matching aspect. All right. Anybody from is anybody on the line from Big Brothers Big Sisters? We'll come back to some of what our folks mentioned earlier. Is anybody from Big Brothers Big Sisters?
Yeah.
Go right ahead, Emily, please.
So I don't know if this is something that you guys can like speak to, but I have found that it's kind of awkward sometimes at the introduction point, like kind of trying to figure out things like to talk about with them, to kind of get them to be comfortable with each other after, you know, we're not there anymore and it's time for them to kind of have that one-on-one time.
Got it. Okay, great point. So let's speak to a few of the questions or comments or thoughts that have been brought forward. Jeanette mentioned something around the parents and them sort of, quote unquote, my words, not hers, getting in the way. Now, a lot of programs, many programs don't do, and Emily, you can correct me, maybe I've been away from Big Brothers Big Sisters for a while, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. The one aspect that I think is a strength of the Big Brothers Big Sisters model, the oldest mentoring model, you know, been around for 114 years, I think, maybe 118 years, or math might be off, is that they do involve the parents early on, pre-match, meaning that the parents can, in fact, talk about the criteria that they would like to see in place for their child or mentee, protege, whatever term you want to use, or as they use little, they have the parental involvement. But most other programs, parents are not necessarily involved at the same level. So in some ways that may sort of mitigate or change or somehow alter those challenges that happen afterwards. Now that may not always be the case once the young person is matched with the mentor, but that's something to think about if your model is different. Secondly, the issue that Emily brought up is always an ongoing issue, right? With mentors and mentees after that initial match. You know, what do we do? What do we say? So programs that are community-based, meaning that they're unsupervised, it's the mentor, big, with their protege and or the little or mentee, oftentimes they have to figure out what to do. Now that's not necessarily the main focus of what we're going to talk about today, but that's when we think about what those structured activities could look like or those talking points, right? So clearly those are some issues that occur in the matching process, right? Or after the match has been made. Next slide. So again, the science aspect is we talked a little bit about the art, just a little bit, and we'll go into is these elements of effective practice for mentoring. And for those of you who are brand new, I can't stress enough how important it is for you all to make yourselves familiar with the elements of effective practice for mentoring. These 6 standards here, this series that Marilyn Mentor and Sadiq and others on this team have played a pivotal role in understanding how we do mentoring, right? How it works, how quality mentoring occurs. And if you're following these best practices, in many respects, it will strengthen the quality of your program. It will strengthen the mentor and mentee's relationship. So our focus today is on matching and initiating here. And we're going to talk a little bit further about that. So again, one source or resource, particularly for those of you who are very new, is to become familiar with the elements of effective practice. So this particular book, you can download it, and Sadiq or Dayon or someone else on the team can tell folks how to access it. If one of you all like to, Dayon, maybe you want to speak to how we can access it. If it's on your website, I know it's on the national, but
yeah, I'm going to see if I can download and put a PDF in the chat, Brian.
Okay, great. All right, next slide, please. So here we're going to just talk briefly, do a little presenting aspect here. Forgive me here for a moment, but just want to talk about these benchmarks, right? So the matching and initiating benchmark, it's all based on research-informed practices. Some of our colleagues in the field, the IRT, Dr. Janice Cooper-Smith and Dr. Rebecca Stelter, who run the IRT consulting company, wrote the 4th edition of the Elements of Effective Practice. Subsequent to that, there have been some supplemental guides that Mentor has put out on group mentoring and a variety of other areas. I'm not as familiar with them. A lot of that has happened since I've left the national office, but I know that the team here can help you, put you in touch with it. But what we're looking at is how do you structure and facilitate that matching process? In a moment, we'll talk about that in our exercise. So these research-informed practices are for youth mentoring programs. And back in the day, prior to the group mentoring come out, most of the information that you would receive was based on one-to-one mentoring, right? So, but a lot of programs, and the evidence is out there, are increasingly using group mentoring as an approach, primarily because it's very difficult to recruit mentors for one-to-one, not just because people aren't interested, but because of the time of day in which mentoring occurs. In many respects, when we see mentoring happen, if it's school-based, it's during the day, right? It could be lunch hour, it could be at the end of school day, it could be after school. So those professionals that oftentimes people want to recruit, oftentimes aren't available during those times. So that's one of the challenges. So group mentoring has started to sort of grow. And group mentoring also speaks to ways in which programs also do activity-based mentoring. It's often easier to focus on a particular type of mentoring with STEM or STEAM mentoring as well. So again, when we think about these benchmarks, that's what we're thinking about. Next slide, please. So again, the elements of effective practice, I'm not going to read all that word for word, but again, for those of you who are brand new, Dakari in particular, as you start to move towards this one-to-one matching, or even thinking about it in the group context, what we think about is what? We want to understand what are the characteristics of the mentor and the mentee. And a lot of times we make certain assumptions, and I have been guilty of this. Sometimes think that just because somebody is African-American, they in fact will be a better mentor with a mentee because the mentee is African-American. And then sometimes that may be the case, but other times it may not be. But here are some other characteristics that you need to think about. You need to think about gender, you need to think about ethnicity, you need to think about personality, you need to think about interests, preferences, right? What does the mentor want in a young person, right? What does a parent or guardian want if parents and guardians have a particular say-so in your program? And again, the Big Brothers Big Sisters model is one of the only programs that I've seen do this. And my personal feeling, and I don't have the research to necessarily support that, but my gut instinct is that because they engage the parents early on in the matching process, meaning that the parent can say, look, I like to have a mentor with this particular type of background. I think in some cases, not all, in some cases, it strengthens the relationship afterward. So I think a lot of times that's not necessarily doable, if you will, in certain types of mentoring programs because of the nature of the program. But it's something to consider when you're thinking about your mentoring program and more particularly your matching process, right? The other thing, an issue that for those of us, I didn't have this issue when I worked in DC mentoring programs as much, but proximity, right? How close are the mentor and the mentee to each other? And for those of you in site-based programs or school-based programs, if let's say you have a corporate volunteer and you are partners with Geico, like my old organization, Mentors Inc., we had a corporate relationship with Geico, but we were community-based. So young people could get picked up, and we were high school age on the weekend. But if you're doing a site-based mentoring program, let's say you're in Baltimore and you want to work with Under Armour. Well, Under Armour is located way the heck over here, but your program is way over here in a different part of town. You may not be able to do that program at the time of day. So when we think about matching, a lot of times people don't think about that proximity. It's one of the questions that you're asking during the interview process, but also just in terms of the preparation process is how available can that mentor be, okay? So then the next piece here, and I put this in red, this kind of speaks to a little bit of what I think someone mentioned earlier, is that initial match meeting. So at a program, and I'll share a little bit more about this later on, a lot of programs will just put young people and mentors and mentees together and say, have at it, all right? They'll basically put you in a room, here's some activities, and they'll just sort of let them figure that whole thing out. Now, there's pluses and minuses to that. Dakari spoke about his program, the group mentoring activities, and I'll have him talk about this in a moment if he's comfortable with it. where mentors and mentees just get together and they themselves, after a series of activities, they may sort of find themselves and naturally connect. There's strength in that as well. But for a lot of programs, if you spend a lot of time on the front end with some intentionality, with the screening process, with the recruiting, with the training, and you just sort of put them together, sometimes they don't know what to do beyond that. And that's kind of speaks to what Emily is saying. So you have to think about what that looks like. The next here is that piece here when we think about how we engage the parents, right? What's their role? Is there a contract being signed between mentor and mentee? What's the roles and the responsibility? How often will mentors and mentees get together? All right. And then thinking about risk management policies and issues. So if you're working with younger children, elementary age in particular, we always talk about screening. It doesn't mean that we don't screen at the middle school level or the high school level, but in particular, the risk management issues and policies, making sure that your mentors are thoroughly screened. And if you're doing something site-based, right, that there is a process perhaps at the school that supersedes even your process. It may not allow for mentors to just walk into the school, even if they've been screened. There may be a process. So you have to think about that around that whole matching issue as well. Next slide, please. So the other aspect to elements of effective practice, and you'll see the benchmarks as the standards, the things that you should follow, i.e. the practices that you should follow, and then the enhancements that you think are good practices, but they're not necessarily something that you actually have to do. Program matches the mentee with a mentor who is at least 3 years older. In some cases, that's done even larger in terms of the length of time between mentor and mentee, but it's something to think about, particularly with cross-age peer mentoring programs where you have mentors where high school age students match with mentees. So again, thinking about the maturity level. Program sponsors a group matching event. So here in this particular instance, let me just share my own personal experience. So when I was in DC 15 years ago and I ran a program called Mentors Inc., we had inherited a matching process, right? Where the first initial event happened at what we call matching parties, all right? I don't know how many people do something like that right now. Is just by, I don't know, people can just either type in the chat or just sort of speak to you. How many people have a group-wide, program-wide matching event of some sort? And I'll describe ours in a moment. Anyone? Okay, that's fine. So the matching party was essentially for us to get together. Again, we were high school age, we were community-based, we had done screening. Prior to this initial meeting, so in downtown DC, one of the things that we did is we had the event relatively close to subway so people could get there and to make sure that they, in fact, would have access to public transportation. So this particular event would have it would be structured, would have an opportunity for mentor and mentee and parent to get together in small little pods, do icebreaker games, we do scavenger hunt activities. We do something to make it fun, exciting, and most importantly, and I'll share this again at the end, we make sure that they exchange information. Again, this was done pre-social media. This was done when it was just primarily just, cell phones and texting and email. So today you've got other forms of which you can stay in contact with people. But it's really important for programs to think about the intentionality, because again, why? You're bringing together individuals who don't necessarily know very much about them. Who's nervous? We always think about the mentee or proteges being nervous, but sometimes the mentors are nervous. And even though they might be excited, they don't know how to break the ice. What does that look like? What type of activities can you do together? Dakari, can you speak to a little bit about your group mentoring activity process? I don't know if I'm describing it right, but can you talk a little bit about your experience? I'd love to hear more.
Sure. Now, when you say activity process, what specifically are you referring to?
As I heard you, and you can correct me, you have this group activities that you guys are engaged in prior. That's your matching process. Sounds like it's more of a natural process. Am I correct in saying that?
No. So this is, and I know Dayon's on the line. I hope he doesn't mind me speaking. So this is actually, I was at a former site, excuse me, in which we selected 5 students from every grade. So this was a middle school, 6th, 7th, and 8th. And these were students that were identified through our essentially like our wellness or social emotional teams at the site, at the school, and students who had been identified as needing extra social emotional learning support. Those students were identified through taking surveys throughout the year, or at the end of the year, that measured their social emotional learning understanding. So like how much did they feel like they belonged at the school, their connectedness to the school community. Did they feel like they had somebody in school that loved them or cared for them? Those type of metrics. And then we also kind of tied in like attendance, behavior metrics as well.
Yeah, could you speak to, I think we lost him a little bit, he was breaking up. Dan, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I'm here.
Do you mind, do you mind adding a little bit? Sounds like you have some familiarity with it. If not, then just tell me.
Yeah, this was a great program that Dakari Taylor Watson was overseeing, and they identified 15 students, like he said, five from 6th grade, 5 from 7th, 5 from 8th. And then we brought in a group of mentors. Typically, we would meet on a monthly basis during school time, and we would bring in about 3 to 5 mentors to come in on a monthly basis, and we would go over specific curriculum centered around character building. There was not an individual one-on-one match. However, what we did ask the mentors to do was to pay close attention to maybe 1 or 2 of the boys that were in that program, and to reach out to them on an occasional basis to see how they were doing, and to express interest on that monthly basis to sort of kind of add a hybrid one-on-one component, even though it was primarily a group model.
Okay, I appreciate that. And as I shared earlier, there's some research out there now how sort of group mentoring is sort of melding sort of a hybrid model. So you have sort of a one-on-one component like you described with some group mentoring. And I'm not as familiar with some of the newer technology or some of the newer terminology, but I know Gabe Cooperman sort of spoke to that. So thank you for sharing that. I thought he was also going to mention how some program in the matching process, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in a moment, is that they essentially do, and I think someone, I don't know if it was Jeanette, mentioned a speed dating or speed networking or speed matching sort of process. Jeanette, if you don't mind me calling on you, I know I'm not paying you to do this, but you can go ahead and share what that model looks like, and then I'll add to it as well.
No, it's all good. And I actually answered Lauren or responded to her in the chat because she mentioned that she was doing that at one time, but then, then stopped doing it. So thank you, Lauren, for bringing that out. Yeah, so what we used to do was, it was a speed matching event where mentors and mentees and parents were invited. It was required that all 3 be there. That was the key to that, so that in some instances, a child might have chosen mentor and the parent said no. So what we did a disclaimer in the beginning that there was no guarantee that you would get a match that day, but that we were trying to do it. And we gave questions and things, and just like that speed dating model, it was speed matching. So the mentees went through 2 or 3 times of actually talking to the mentors, but the parents were there. They got to meet the mentors, but they also observed the interaction. So the parents got to see how these mentors were interacting with the children, which definitely put a different spin on it. And there were times when people went away with no match because it just didn't work. Either the child said, nope, I didn't find anybody, or the mentor said nope, or the parent said no. But either way, it was that opportunity to interact. And there wasn't a lot of no's, but every now and then you would get one that was just like, nope, we'll come to the next event and maybe you'll have some different mentors. So it gave everybody the option. It was okay to say no. And it wasn't held against you. But those that did match, where they did say yes, they turned out to be very good matches because all 3 were in agreement that it was going to happen.
Oh, thank you very much I appreciate you sharing that. Lauren, is that essentially your experience as well? You want to add anything to that?
Yeah, very similar. Ours was a little different in a college setting because the parent wasn't a part of helping, obviously through that process, which probably adds another layer of their understanding and sort of helping the mentee get comfortable. Ours, being that it was an all-female focused program, it wasn't enough information for us about the student and the mentor. And they went through in a really quick circle. So it was moving, 22 students through 22 mentors in a very quick fashion. And then the way that they kind of ranked each other, we would have needed more infrastructure with like a matching survey or some more criteria to do that sort of matching, right? So in a program full of women, and then we had this ranking, and then some of those rankings it just kind of didn't fit with sort of how we wanted to foster a sense of, what women need to do together. But it could work beautifully if you had the survey to read and then maybe sort of think about, okay, we see how people kind of are naturally matching, and then it's also backing up with this, with the science of the evidence. I can see how it could work really good for some programs.
Absolutely. I appreciate you both sharing it. So again, you're seeing both the art, right? Just the natural evolution of human beings just interacting naturally, right? So there's a lot of research, particularly with African Americans, that I've started to read more around natural mentoring, but not just with the African American community, but in general, we're seeing research on the natural mentoring, the non-artificial way in which people just sort of interact on a human level, combining it with interest surveys, combining with other data to help support what it is that you need to do to be intentional about it. So again, when you're thinking about your matching process, right, you're going to use your experiences, you're going to use your hypotheses, you're going to have your educated guesses about how you think people will interact and your own program experience. And then you kind of look at the research, the literature. How do we bring human beings together? What is it saying, right? So this whole speed dating approach, personally, I have never seen it. I know Dr. Michael Karcher out of University of Texas, San Antonio, promoted it some years ago with some of the work that he did. You can take a look at Michael Karcher, that's Karcher with a K, some of his research on some of that speed network, and there might be some newer information as well. Next slide, please. So here the group EEPM, and I'm gonna kind of go through a little bit this early. We've already sort of touched on some of this as well, but certainly take a look at, and Dayon, if you can get access to pulling that down and sticking that in the chat, that whole group mentoring, it's a good 80 some odd pages here. And it sort of supports the one-to-one mentoring, but it's also done from the standpoint of having a group mentoring model. So again, very similar, building on it. Consider matching mentors from a diverse background, age, race, gender, interpersonal skills, and professional background. Next slides. Individuals with a helping background. Again, that's really important if you have a helping profession background as well. So the other piece here is to think about putting together youth backgrounds. For those of you who work with young people in different groups, you know that their behaviors are similar and different. Sometimes they can be problematic. Sometimes their behaviors can be aggressive, verbally or in other ways. So if you put a bunch of young people in a particular group that may all have those types of behaviors, sometimes that might be a challenge for volunteers, right? They may not be able to know how to manage that. So you need to be intentional about thinking about, if I'm putting Johnny together, hanging out over here with Brian, and Brian acts out, maybe that's not a good fit. Do they have any history between the two? Will they be tripping on each other and, ready to go at it? So you want to think about that, because now you're bringing in what? You're bringing in this volunteer who doesn't necessarily have maybe the skills or the previous knowledge to know how to deal with that. So you want to make sure that you're intentional about thinking about that prior. Because oftentimes we think about what the skills are of the mentor. So I also like to add, and I didn't see this in the group mentoring EEPM, is if you have a group mentoring program, do your mentors actually have any experience facilitating groups? Either that's working in teams at their job, do they have any sort of instructional skills? Do they have the ability to deal and manage conflict? So some of the questions that you're asking during the interview process is, what's your experience like with that? Get an opportunity to ask sort of a behavioral-based interview question to help you understand more about that mentor. I didn't see a lot of that in the group EPM, and I'll certainly bring it up to the folks at at another level to kind of think about those skill sets, relational skills that mentors need to have. Next slide, please. Yeah. So then here, again, these icebreaker activities are so important. Again, when we're thinking about groups, right? What is called? Forming, norming, storming, and performing and adjourning. Group dynamics, one-on-one. Some of you are maybe familiar with that. If you're not, we certainly share that with you down the road. But groups form differently, right? It takes them some time to norm their behaviors. It takes them some time to really develop a cohesive sense of who they are. So in some cases, what you have to do on a programmatic level is that you got to be intentional, right? You got to come up with icebreaker activities, at the start of perhaps your session. You might even do what we used to call at Best Kids when I used to run that. Our founder came up with the term roses and thorns. What worked well, or perhaps didn't work as well. So you become intentional about that. You create some sort of structure. It doesn't have to be completely structured, but when you're starting your program in group mentoring circles, or perhaps on the weekend, you might have a peer-based activities with mentors who are in one-to-one relationships, but on weekends, they may in fact get together. So when I was at Mentors Inc., we would do monthly activities. So our program was one-to-one, but once a month, we get together with our mentors and mentees. And then what we're talking about is reinforcing the connectedness between mentors and mentees by having these activities. We could be going to a ball game. We could go to a museum. We could do some sort of activity to learn about the city of DC, right? So all of those types of activities are both intentional. They connect mentors and mentees, but they also build a bond, a cohesiveness with the organization. So think about that as well. All right. Next slide, please. So what makes a good mentor? Next slide. A mentor must be youth-centered, emotionally aware, and self-aware. Must have problem-solving skills, be aware of their own personal bias and cultural competence. A mentor is capable of fulfilling a role committed to children, youth, and program requirements. And there may be other characteristics as well that you need to think about in terms of the intentionality. But these are some basic characteristics that you want to think about when looking for mentors. Next slide. The matching process. This is it right here. For those programs that are trying to be more intentional, trying to use the science aspect, i.e. the evidence, here's some materials that you need to have in place. All right, you all get access to the slide deck if you want it, and many of you are probably doing it. Applications, mentor and mentee, having that information, that data, that demographic information to help you to be informed about your matching process. So some of that's input from parents or guardians, caregivers, school staff, and others. You might do interest surveys. You want to look at interests, motivations, personalities, interviews. It's very difficult, I know, in many cases to interview students, but if you have the opportunity as a program to interview students, maybe with a short 10, 15-minute interview, so that you at least get a sense of who the mentees are. When I was at Mentors Inc., we were basically restarting our program, and we became very intentional on both sides, the interview process of the mentor and the interview process of mentee. So all of this stuff is happening prior to what? Prior to the matching actually occurring. Because what we would do in our matching process, once we gathered all this information together, the application, the interest survey, the interview information and data, we would sit in a big room, would be myself and other staff persons. Somebody would have a folder on the mentor and somebody would have a folder on the mentee. You have a big board, listed all the individuals' names, mentor side and mentee. And then we would do the matching process. And people would quote unquote fight for whoever that they thought was the best fit. Again, that was more the art, because we did the science part. We brought in all our data, we brought in all our tools, but sometimes that wasn't even enough, right? So again, the art and the science of matching and initiating, thinking about that. Any quick questions, anything in the chat that I may have missed? Does anybody have any questions they want to ask? All right, next slide, please. So again, making matches, the process and the design. So you have the process of making matches, staff will choose. Sometimes mentor will choose. Sometimes mentee chooses. That's sort of the youth-directed matching. One of the organizations we used to work with called the National Guard Youth Challenge Program. There's one in Maryland, works with older youth. The young person was involved. They're 16 to 18 years of age, and they were involved with helping to identify their mentors. The parent guardian chooses. It can be a mutual or a combination, I should have put there, of all the different types of things that you saw there. And then the activity or group-based matching, so that speed dating process that may occur initially at the mentoring event. So these are different ways in which matching can occur. And some of you are going to use a combination of all of these things. Next slide. So the interest survey, I just put this in there real briefly, and I'll go over this quickly. A lot of times programs, particularly just first starting off, they don't even ask the young people, what do you want in a mentor? You know, what do you have in store? What are you thinking about? And sometimes they say, well, they don't know. Well, in that case, you're going to ask them, what are some of the things that they like, right? You know, what type of music? Do you like going to museums? Do you like reading books? Do you want to play card or board games? Are you into, I think I had video games on there. I must have taken it off. But those are the types of things where you're trying to determine a little bit about the student. And particularly when they're younger, the elementary age, they may not necessarily have a lot to write, but thinking about being intentional, right? Using the tools, and I'm sure that the folks at Maryland Mentor have templates of interest surveys. So again, if you're not doing that, think about that. Perhaps it may strengthen the match process for you. Next slide, please. So Dr. Sanchez, I'd get enough time because I know we didn't have as much time, and I'm trying to speed through a little bit so we can get to our activity here in a moment. We think about matching by social identity, and in this particular case, race and ethnicity. Dr. Bernadette Sanchez, a longtime mentoring researcher. She's no longer at DePaul. She's actually at University of Illinois at Chicago with Dr. David Dubois. But she talks about using research-based tools to assess ethnic and racial identity. And to think about mentees who don't have a strong ethnic or racial identity, and perhaps putting them together with somebody who has a strong background, cultural background. So very important to think about that as well. Next slide. Matching youth and adults based on shared interests, again, is a strong predictor of successful mentoring relationships. Having shared interests both connects participants more easily to a mentor, all right? Shared understanding helps establish perceptions of ethnic or cultural similarity. Matching based on shared and ethnic racial identity doesn't always necessarily work. There's research to say that that's not always the strongest, but you usually do that if, in fact, the youth or the parent requests same race, same culture matches. There are some programs who are, you know, cultural specific, whether they're Native American, Latino, African American, and so on and so forth. And then now there's not as much research, and I have to do some more digging when we think about social identity. Matching LGBTQ youth as well is also something that the research field has to think about with more intentionality. So again, this is really important. Again, matching based on shared ethnic or racial identity, if the youth requests it, have limited access to adults who've had similar life experiences, may have a negative self-image, and their goals that are best supported by an adult who has been there, right? So when we think about that, that's important as well. And that's not just racial, ethnic, it could be gender-based as well, or LGBTQ as well. So we're seeing some of that, at least organically. Next slide, please.
And Brian, if I could interject really quickly, please. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
So number one, there are a couple of additional resources. I just want to direct everybody to the chat box. So number one, Dayon also shared the original EEP link. So that's clickable, the checklist and the guide for folks to be able to download. Number one. Number two, there's a group mentoring EEP link. That's also in the chat box. Actually, the actual document you all can just download right there. Andrew was also looking, we actually conducted a group mentoring training earlier this year or sometimes in 2021. So we'll drop that link. The last thing though, Brian, I wanted to get your thoughts on, and it's something that I have been experimenting with a few other programs, and it sort of gets to the core of, again, this idea of art and science. And that's around, this idea of utilizing personality tests as an additional layer to match mentors and mentees. Some of us are, really subscribed to personality tests. I'm one of them, taking all sorts. And I found them to be, again, just like not the end all be all, but I think can add that additional layer. And then depending on your philosophy of programming, you could take somebody that has, a mentor or a mentee that might be super extroverted or a little bit more introverted, and you might match those opposites together on purpose. Or, right, if it's an extreme situation, there could be like, again, a super high performing introverted adult or young person, and you decide to put those together. So I wanted to get your thoughts, for the benefit of the attendees, thoughts around leveraging additional data like personality tests in the matching equation.
Appreciate your question. If I understand you correctly, I think it's a wonderful question. I don't know the mentoring research on that. I know there was sort of a pushback some years ago when I was at Mentors Inc. and I was there from 07 to 08. I know I stumbled across some personality testing. I know that there are some programs, I just can't spend a minute, that are using personality. I think, and correct me, Sadiq, maybe you've done some research on it. I think there was an organization or a personality called True Colors. I don't know if that still exists, that we're using personality tests of some sort. I think everything is open at this point. I don't know whether or not it's mentoring specific enough, but I don't know if you necessarily need it to be. I certainly think if there's a program, maybe this is with older youth, maybe even older youth who might be in a particular field, that perhaps that can work. But I know we used to joke about this. Oh, we need a personality test. Oh, we need something that's like some of this these companies that do, I forgot the name of these companies, but they would pair people together, True Harmony or whatever, something like that. That type of thing. So I think that the field, maybe, again, you're going to get pluses and minuses, the strengths and limitations to everything. I think we need to do a little digging and see if there are programs. Now I'm not at the national office level where you hear or see things more frequently. I do think it's something to consider. Yeah, matchmaking services, just like you were saying down below. I don't know at the time, again, this is 15 years ago, if there was enough research on that. But I think it's a really important question to pose to both researchers and practitioners, like the Big Brothers Big Sisters, some of the larger national organizations, to see whether or not they considered it and sort of looked at the strengths and limitations of doing personality tests. So great question, appreciate it. All right, I know we got a little bit more time here. I want to kind of go through quickly and get into our exercise, and perhaps we can do at least one of them. So Dr. Howard Stevenson out of the University of Pennsylvania is not a quote unquote mentoring scholar, but certainly I've benefited from some of his work. He talks about attunement, that is the connection between individuals. Dr. Tom Keller, who is a mentoring researcher, and Julia Price did some research as well. Took the slide out, probably should have kept it in there, but this whole idea of understanding, how do young people see themselves? How do they enhance their social competence and reduce defensiveness? So we want to build close relationships. What does that look like? I feel understood by you, right? That's what you want your mentees or proteges to be able to sort of feel from the mentors. You can handle what I have to say. It's safe to express my true emotions about this situation. You can help me better understand my experiences in the world. And in fact, if folks are attuned, mentor, protege, mentor, mentee, big, little, whatever term you want, if it's a successful match, they are attuned, they're connected, right? So that's really important when we think about why we do this. We're doing this because we want to strengthen the quality of those relationships between that individuals. And it's really important. If the relationship quality is not done, I mean, you've wasted a lot of people, quote unquote, time on one level, but you've also perhaps infected in a very negative way a young person ability to connect with adults. Not saying it's totally out the door, but I've seen this in programs, some that I've been a part of and others just from hearing about it. And one of these versions of this type of training, we always see Dr. Jean Rose and Dr. Jean Grossman's research about how awful and how damaging a mentoring relationship can be if a mentor drops out. Really want to find adults who are mentors who have their stuff together, for lack of a better word. That's important. All right, next slide. Let me keep it moving. So the art of matching and a little science, we went through that. Let's talk a little bit about this right now. So what I'd like to do here is to do this matching exercise. So at this point, Sadiq, this is where I'm gonna need you and Dayon and Andrew to try to help me figure out how many people we have. I know we've had some people who had to drop off a little early. We might be able to do 3 groups of 5. Just not sure how many people. Oh, we got my good buddy Michael Stratton. How you doing, Michael?
Yeah, we got 19.
It looks like we have
3 groups of 5.
Yeah, that should be
okay. So this is what I like you guys to do. All right. Hopefully this makes sense. I haven't done this virtually yet, but we're all getting used to this world. I want you to take a photo of this particular slide, and I want these questions here. So what you're going to have is you're going to have sort of a scenario. You're going to have a scenario that describes a mentor, and we'll show this in a moment, and mentee, right? And you're going to take pictures of the slides, and we'll have you in the groups. I want you to ask yourselves about whether or not the person, the mentor and mentee would be a good fit. So, and I want you to think about some of the things we talked about today, maybe some of the criteria that you use, as well as the process and the matching process, right? What criteria did you use? What process did you use to make the match? Did you have enough information about the individuals to make the match? And if in fact there was additional information. So take everybody pull out your phones, take a picture of this particular slide. Then I'll show you real quick. You can go to the next slide, Sadiq. I'll show people. And then you'll take a picture of this slide and we'll get back together. We're going to do a couple of them. So here's your scenario here, right? Next slide.
making sure everybody's ready. Make sure everybody got their picture taken. Okay, next one. Get your phone ready.
So again here. All right, and then here we have, this is going to be 2 slides. We may not have time to do all of them. And then here's a group match.
Could you possibly go back to the one before this?
Absolutely. Yeah, I know we went a little quick. Sorry about that.
We moving fast. That's right.
Yeah. I should have probably given these as a handout attachment in retrospect, but.
No, but this is such a great exercise, though, Brian, because again, you know, pro tip for everyone on, this is an exercise you all can practice with your teams. So everybody will get a copy of the slides, but now even if we only get through a couple of them, Brian, this is such an amazing exercise. I always enjoy it.
Okay. So let's take a stab, but not the right expression. Let's take a look at each one of these scenarios here. And we're going to break you up into groups. Sadiq and the team will break you up into groups, and it will get you back together. Let's see here. It's 11:36 in like 15 minutes. And we'll have a few minutes to kind of talk through them. How's that sound?
Okay. So you want folks to do 2 of the scenarios, Brian, in the 10 minutes?
You can take one of the first 2 and definitely do the group one so we can have a conversation. I don't think the group mentoring matching process is discussed enough. And perhaps we can learn from each other, particularly for those of y'all who are doing this already. All right.
All right. Let me.
No necessarily a right or wrong answer. So just feel free to sort of capture the information and then talk amongst yourself. Sadiq will put you into groups in a moment here.
Okay, it's testing my Zoom skills. Okay, everybody, we're opening these up. We will see you in 10.5 minutes. If you have any issue whatsoever, just message us and we'll make sure that you're taken care of.
Was there 4 slides or 5?
I think there might have been 5 because this is the group matching one is 2 slides. So this is sort of then I think either the slide before this might have shown who the people were, the mentors were.
Okay. I've got 4.
Okay, is that Shane Young? Also, Michael Molly, you want to step into the breakout room? I put you in room 1.
All right.
Shane Young.
I will join. I'm just going to bounce in the rooms and make sure they have all of the slides.
Okay, let's pause this recording too. How do we pause this recording? I don't see the pause button. Andrew, can you pause the recording?
Well, we really did drop off, didn't we?
Yep. Well, welcome back. Floor is back to you, Brian.
Well, was it something that I said? I'm not sure, but but here we go. We got folks that are sort of popping back on.
No, they're back now. They're back now. That breakout.
That was being a little facetious.
They took their full 60 seconds. That means they were having a great combo.
That was too short.
I know. When I look back at this, Jeanette, I said I should have just had 2 scenarios. It wasn't enough time. So,
and I was still talking.
Yeah, we were still on the first scenario.
Yeah. I apologize sincerely for that. So why don't we get right into it? Folks that were in room 1, why don't you guys give me like 15 seconds of what your thoughts were on this first scenario with Narita and Raquel.
So we had concerns over Narita's work schedule. We would want to inquire more a little bit about the flexibility and if she would be able to commit to regularly attending those after school sessions. And then as well with Raquel, we would want to talk to the people that lead her group activities she participates in, kind of see how long it takes for her to open up, so we can set good expectations for the mentor. But overall, we did not think that we would match them together based on this information.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Room 2 or room 3, anything similar or different? Laura, what program are you with? Sorry, I missed that.
Oh, I am with Big Brothers Big Sisters.
Fantastic. Thank you.
So group 2 said very similar things. Our biggest worry was her work schedule, and we'd love to find out more about that. We didn't really come to a final decision because we just said we wanted to find out more, but we thought it was good that they're both Latina females, and she'd be a good role model for her and give her experience with adults to kind of bring her out of her shell. But again, if she's working that much, that might not all happen.
Thank you, Hannah. And any other thoughts? Everything that you all just mentioned, I think, is very important. The need for more information. So again, that's why you will see programs, again, Big Brothers Big Sisters has been around forever, and they certainly have, used the science part of it really well in terms of adding all these sort of different tools in their measurement of trying to determine. And everybody sort of picked up on, yes, 50 to 60 hour work week, that's tough. Will you be available? This particular type of individual, and I didn't put this in there, might not be best suited for a site-based program. Maybe they're better suited for a community-based mentoring program where there would be more flexibility. So again, thinking about what that looks like. And again, community-based, using the Brian Sales definition, is really an unsupervised match that's outside the setting of parental or programmatic sort of control or influence. They're not around people, unsupervised settings. So really thinking about that as well. And the fact that you all both asked for more information before the matches were made makes me realize that you're trying to be intentional about that as well. Beautiful, fantastic. Any other thoughts about this particular scenario? All right, so let's go to the next one. Next slide, please. So I didn't put a person's name here for the white male. Apologies for that. Thoughts, ideas? Room 3, maybe? I'm not sure who was in room 3.
Room 3, we didn't get to the second question.
Okay. All right. Well, room 2. It's all good. It was a lot, and I realized it.
It was a nice.
Room 2 didn't get there either. We did it different.
How about this? Let's do it like this. Let's read the daggone thing here. So here we have a 28-year-old white male with a master wants to volunteer as a mentor in your community-based mentoring program that serves youth from a variety of different socioeconomic backgrounds. He's got a government job, has the time, energy, lacks direct experience with youth of color. Youth 1, Hakeem is an 11-year-old African-American boy from a single-parent household. He does okay in school, but loves sports and video games. Isn't sure about what a mentor is. He is, quote unquote, beginning to act out in school and has received an in-school suspension. Youth 2, Juan is a 12-year-old Salvadoran boy whose family immigrated to the U.S. A few years ago. He's shy, doesn't speak English very well, is struggling in school, is beginning to be recruited by the local gang. His family is desperate for him to find a program to help him make good choices. Thoughts, ideas. And these are generalizations, not meaning to stereotype anybody, but these are real life types of things that have happened, both in my experience, programs, and my own experience.
I think regardless, I would want to make sure that the mentor, no matter which kid he's matched with, is trained more regularly and checked in with like his match support or his case management, just on like diversity training and making sure he has at least an understanding of people that grew up differently than he did, because I don't want to him going into this ignorant of what they might be facing. But then I also don't necessarily think that he would be a great role model since he doesn't have experience with what Youth 2 is facing.
Right.
So I probably wouldn't match him with that child.
Right.
Any other thoughts? Thank you, Laura. So we oftentimes have lots of cross-race, cross-ethnic matches. Again, when we have these particular types of situations happen, it's always difficult to find male mentors of all backgrounds. And a lot of times as programs, you are compelled in many respects to using what you have, right? In some cases, you know, you're pushed because of your funding source, you're pushed by your program director or executive director to really make a match happen. And we don't think about the long-term ramifications of this. So this individual, you don't have a lot of information on this person as well, right? You would need to probably see what they do in a training. You want to get more information on the interview about their background and how open. Because in many instances, you might have an individual who wants to mentor, doesn't have the background of a young person that they might be matched with. That doesn't necessarily rule them out. You do need to think about that. So what Laura mentioned earlier about the training, I think that's important as well, in that ongoing training. Did any of the other groups have any thoughts, or anyone have any thoughts about this? All right, let's move to Emanuela, go right ahead.
Yes.
I saw your hand raised, go right ahead.
We did not comment that one, but I just want to share some experience that I have about that, because sometimes it's true that we can have Mentee who they are from other countries and they don't speak English anything, but their parents can want them to be matched with someone who is native, English native speaking. So we definitely will ask for more information about the situation and see if the parent and Mentee are open to be matched with someone who doesn't have experience about a person of color, and some inclusive courses that we can have, maybe can help the mentor to be more open for that.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much. All right, we've just got a couple more minutes here. I want to go through the last piece here. So I'm going to read it real briefly, and then you guys get a chance to maybe respond to it. Program is running a group-based after-school mentoring program. Focuses on STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math at a local middle school. You've got to match 2 mentors, a 1-to-4 ratio of diverse background. We've got 2 potential mentors. Susan, a retired white woman, married with 2 adult children, worked in a nonprofit for over 4 years, ready to give back. Jim is a STEM professional, unmarried with over 15 years of experience in biochem, but doesn't have any experience working with, should say youth, forgive the typo, influenced by his Christian faith, sees mentoring as a part of his religious beliefs. Next slide. So we have 2 groups here. We've got Iyabo, a 12-year-old in 6th grade, excellent student, families from Nigeria, outgoing personality. Levi, a 12-year-old boy, who's a very good student, but is very shy and introverted. Maria, 13-year-old, is a good student, but is often tired because she often has to babysit her younger siblings while her parents work. Not sure she can make all the mentoring sessions. Group 2, Vladimir, 13-year-old 7th grader, who's very smart but doesn't apply himself and gets in trouble. Simon, a 12-year-old student with decent grades, but sometimes is unsure of himself. Lee is a 14-year-old student, very artistic and smart, but doesn't like school, yet still does well. So I know that's a lot of information. Got those 2 mentors. How would you arrange this? Who would you put where? Or perhaps you maybe move the individual students around. Any thoughts about this?
So room 2 did this exercise a little bit differently. We
Okay.
just looked at the groups specifically
Okay.
and the youths in the group, and we pretty much decided that the students that were paired together in each group were not a great match. Group 2 specifically, we did not think was a good group per se, because they all seemed to be sort of distracted and, you know, a little pessimistic, if you will. So we thought that they need more of a strong lead youth wise in their group. So we came up with the idea that we just need to mix and match some of those students to form better groups.
Okay. Thank you very much, Lisa. That's the type of thinking that you all have to do when you're thinking about putting together mentors and mentees, particularly in group mentoring. I don't have experience necessarily with group mentoring, definitely have experience working with small groups of young people in the past, but those are the types of things that you're thinking about in terms of characteristics, the behaviors, right, the attitudes, any prior information or knowledge about the students, maybe their background and so forth. Let's see, Alicia, what did you think about the mentors? Did you guys have any thoughts about the mentors in terms of their strengths?
We did not specifically review that in depth, although, you know, as we just went over it, I think that I would definitely, if I go back to the screenshot, hang on one second.
Go back to the last slide, please. Sadiq,
yes,
I'm sorry.
Thank you. So if I had to put 1 with 1, I would definitely put mentor 1 with group 2 if we could not switch around the students. And I say that because just skimming over it, I would think that Jim, with little experience working with youth, it would be hard for him to redirect those youths that are feeding off of each other and not interactive.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, you all. I appreciate all the input today. I think I'm going to turn this back over. So appreciate all your insight today. Hopefully this is beneficial. I appreciate and enjoyed the conversation that we had today. Sadiq?
Sorry, just real quick, if you guys could fill out that Survey Monkey, then that would be greatly appreciated. I put it in the chat.
All right, some additional slides there just on some other stuff in terms of resources. Really good, important information from Dr. Renee Spencer about why mentoring relationships fail. You'll see that in there as well. So.
Thank you so much. Are you guys able to share your contact information also in the chat?
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
Apologies, they put that on there.
Very good. Thank you so much. I'm not sure where Sadiq is, but on behalf of our mentor, Maryland, DC, we want to thank you. He may have had to step off. Just a couple quick announcements. We've got another training coming on Wednesday, October 14th. Check that out, how to become an askable adult. Check that out. Andrew, if you could put our information for the DC office and the Maryland office, Michael Molly, if you could put our information in the chat, Sadiq's email address and our email address. The last announcement that we have is we've got the Md4y Conference coming up in November. Please make sure that you and your organization sign up. It's a Maryland statewide conference. It'll be held in person in Annapolis. And it's a 2-day conference. And the dates are November 17th and 18th. Make sure that you come and visit us on November 17th and 18th in Annapolis. Once again, thank you so much, everyone, for being on the call. Please complete the survey just so that we can get some feedback from you. If you just want to scan that QR code that's on the screen right now, just scan that QR code. It'll come right up from SurveyMonkey. And thank you so much. If you need any information for your programs, you need any assistance, please reach out to us so that we can help. Brian, thank you so much for being on our call today, man. We so appreciate your leadership and your direction, and just thankful for everything that you do. Everybody have a good, what's today? Tuesday? Tuesday. Have a great Tuesday. Take care.
You as well. Take care. Y'all keep pushing. Right.
Thanks, man.
Appreciate you, man. All right.
Thank you.